Hello friends, welcome to the video series on the BEPS action items. We are here to talk about action item number 6, which is part of the 15 action items that were recently finalized by OECD last week. Action item number 6, as you all know, focuses on prevention of treaty abuse. I'm joined by Mr. Mathur here. I'm Kunj Vaidya. Mr. Mathur is former DGIT and Competition Authority of India, and we'll run this as a session of a few questions and answers that allows you to take away some of the basics and some of the interesting points coming out of these action items. So Mr. Mathur, as a first question, beyond the obvious of avoiding double non-taxation, what's the objective here of this particular action item?
The perception which the OECD got from the G20 countries which commissioned it to do this project on BEPS was that taxpayers were utilizing treaties between two countries, they not being residents of either country, getting a treaty benefit. The treaty benefit could result either in double non-taxation, could result in less taxation, as in the case of dividend payouts from their own country of residence being at a higher rate with a third country than if they set up base in a second country at where the tax rates would be, withholding rates would be lesser.
Would it be fair to say that use of treaties in a manner which it was not envisaged to?
Absolutely. So this is the basic reason, and the treaty shopping was the basic objective that they had to get it over with.
I see. Now, what OECD has proposed in this action item, or rather laid it out, is to have a limitation of benefits rule, an LOB, a simplified LOB rule, which has some prescribed measures also and factors as well. Would you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, the limitation of benefits has been as an article in all of US treaties with other countries. India too has had an LOB article in its treaties, and more so in the recent past, most of the treaties have the LOB clause. Now the LOB is actually setting out certain conditions for a taxpayer to obtain a treaty benefit as a resident of a country. So in the case of a corporate, it could be whether its principal shares are traded on a stock exchange in that country, stated country of residence. So these are conditions laid down for each kind of entity, and they have been operative for a number of years.
Are these conditions a lot cut and dry, very simple, straightforward, given that you need to have certain level of expenditure or number of people in a particular jurisdiction or number of or amount of shareholding? Or are they subjective, which would then lead into more interpretation issues and litigation and that kind of stuff?
Well, possibly it would lead to litigation, but largely the provisions are pretty straightforward, and the conditions laid out are also pretty straightforward. Okay. So they may not result in much litigation. But the substance issue which you have raised is largely an issue of harmful tax competition. So one would have to see as to whether there is a specific amount of expenditure laid out by a taxpayer in a country which he is claiming to be a tax resident of. Also, whether the risk, he is incurring any risks in that country. So that would become a very important feature of his residence of a country.
So it'll be important to examine how a particular taxpayer is set up in that jurisdiction through which it is coming in. And if I were to then bring in Mauritius into play here, and where majority of FDI still gets routed through into India, we have a TRC, that is the only requirement, blessed by Supreme Court in Azadi Bachao, kind of a settled situation until the government pulls back the circular. How does that play? And of course, we have GAR also, General Anti-Avoidance Regulations, around the corner. So a few irony or rather contradictory positions and situations under these framework.
But so far as the Mauritius Treaty is concerned, whichever government came, they all wanted to keep its beneficial aspects in place. So much so that the government fought a case against its own tax department to see that the benefits of the tax treaty were available to taxpayers who came in through Mauritius. So that was a case, or is a case, of a trade-off between tax and investment. So if that is, and that is what the Azadi Bachao judgment, the Supreme Court decision, also upheld.
Now you have a right point here, because what government tried doing through Mauritius is facilitate investments coming in, and there is a particular objective there. With GAR, there is a different objective that the government has in mind, and all of these are within the sovereign rights of a country to see whatever it can do to achieve the objectives for the country that are set. But nonetheless, it does put the taxpayers and the companies in a bit of an odd situation here to say, which way do I go and how do I make sure that I'm going to have certainty? And that brings me to my next question, which is the OECD has also put in a clause for having discretionary clause that allows the competent authority to allow the benefit of a treaty to a taxpayer, even if that particular person is not qualifying.
So I think that this is a very subjective reasoning on the basis of which a request can be made. The request can be made by stating that the reason for investment was not to obtain a tax benefit, but the investment was made for reasons other than that, which are more important.
For example, if you were to come in, and this is something we always miss out, when companies are coming in from a particular jurisdictions, they are looking for having an exit route available just in case things don't work out, new jurisdictions.
That is the rationale for the the adversity which the Mauritius Treaty caused.
Right.
People, taxpayers invested into India not because they were going to look straight away at selling off in India. They came into India but were looking for an exit clause also, an easy exit whenever they wanted to exit. And that exit would have been tax-free for them in India as also in Mauritius. So maybe the double non-taxation had become a major issue, and therefore this was one of the issues which the OECD must have considered in its resolution on the Action Point 6.
Would you then say, and to our audience, I think it's a very interesting situation that we are in, and a very interesting time that we are in today in when it comes to taxes and international taxes, because you have countries with their own domestic LOB or principal purpose test or regulations like a general anti-avoidance regulation, which India will have in 2017 on one hand. You have these situations like Mauritius where you have TRC and you can come through it without having much in there. And now we have G20 coming together, have this OECD BEPS section plan on 15 items, including that's number 6. Somewhere all of them go in different directions, and it'll be interesting to see how it all comes together. One thing is for sure, I don't think it's going to make things as simple as it can be perceived to be, or it was perceived to be, but time will tell. Thank you so much for joining us today.